So hi Camilla, thanks for joining us today. Where do people know you from?
I have an Instagram account called a Nordic Knitting Tale, where I show all everything I make. I sew and I knit, and I make knitting patterns. So it's mostly like an Instagram channel for knitting and also a little bit of sewing.
Okay. And could you tell something about yourself? Do you have another job?
It's making knitting patterns is my part-time job. I also work as a nurse part-time. Okay. I've been working as a nurse for almost 20 years, and I work as a nurse at oncology outpatient clinic where I give chemo, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Talk to cancer patients. So I have 2 jobs. So I don't work as many hours as a nurse as I used to do, but I like to keep working as a nurse because I love that job, and I'm afraid that if I had to work full-time as a knitting designer, it would kill my creativity, because I had to be a certain amount of creative every month to make a certain amount of money every month. Yes. So I like to have my how can I say, bread and butter job. Mm-hmm. And whatever I make on my knitting patterns is like a bonus. Mm-hmm. So that gives me the freedom of being creative when I want to be creative and not when I have to be creative. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I knit a lot, sometimes I sew a bit more and do other creative things, because I love to be creative, not only knitting. And that's the way I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. And for people who don't know you yet, you told that you have an Instagram account and an own website. Do you also sell your products on other platforms, or?
Yeah, I sell my knitting patterns on my website at nordicknittingtale.com. And then I also sell it on selected yarn shops here in Denmark, and yeah, mostly. But I mostly sell on my own website, where people can go and download the pattern instantly.
Okay. And are these patterns also available in multiple languages, or only in Danish?
Yeah, most of them are available in Danish, of course. All of them are available in Danish, but then also Norwegian and English. I sell a lot of Norwegian patterns. Danish and Norwegian are similar, but some Norwegians, they can also knit in Danish, but some of them prefer to knit in Norwegian. So I sell a lot, and knitting in Norwegian is very popular. More popular here in Denmark. So I concentrate a lot of getting my patterns translated into Norwegian and then English. I also have some of my patterns translated into French and German and Swedish, but they haven't been selling so good. So I took a little break on that, because it's a lot of work translating the patterns, and it's expensive. And as I said before, this is only my part-time job, and I also have 2 kids and a husband and a big house. So there's only so much amount of time in my life. So I concentrate on English and Norwegian and Danish for now. Yeah.
Why do you think that people want to read more Norwegian instructions rather than Danish?
Because, as I said, that Danish and Norwegian are very similar. I can read a Norwegian knitting pattern without any problems. There are a few words that are different, and if you just know those words, it's very easy. But if you read a complicated knitting pattern, it's easier in your own language. Then you don't have to all the time think this word is a little bit different, and some words in Norwegian and Danish, you say the same, but they have the complete opposite meaning.
Okay.
So that's why I think many prefer to buy them in Norwegian, even though I can see on my web shop that I have many Norwegians buying my old patterns, which are not translated into Norwegian, buying them in Danish. So apparently some of them don't have a problem with it.
Okay. It's very interesting. Very interesting, yes. And when did you learn to knit? Was it something you learned from your mother in school, or?
Yeah, my grandmother, which is now, she's still alive. She's 98 years old, very old. She learned, she was always very creative. She used to be like a sewist for a professional. She sewed for people. And she was also knitting a lot and always wanted to learn how to knit. And she tried when I was a kid, she tried to learn me both how to sew and knit, but I didn't have the patience for it. And in my youth, I was always trying to learn how to knit. I never got past the knitting scarves point. I was always knitting scarves.
I get that.
Very, very long scarves. And if you looked at them, there were a lot of mistakes, but I didn't care. And when I got pregnant, I thought, now I want to learn how to knit for my kid. And I talked to some of my colleagues, and that's like 11 years ago now. And she gave me all those old knitting patterns from knitting magazines, and I was like looking at them, and it was like reading Russian. And also the knitting patterns were like, the models were like very old-fashioned, not old-fashioned in a good way, but old-fashioned in a very bad way. So I didn't really find anything I liked. So compared with that, and that I thought the knitting patterns were written in Russian, I gave up. And then I had my baby, and that was a very stressful time. And when things started calming down a little bit, I thought, I'll give it a go again. And I actually managed to knit a little slip over for her. And today I wish that I saved it because it was so ugly. It was full of mistakes, but it started it. And then I really finally understood. I was trying to finally understood what the knitting was all about. And I was starting to knitting her sweaters and cardigans. And then she grew up. And when she was like 2 years old, I thought, oh, there's so many stitches on my needle, and it takes a lot of time, and I couldn't really find any nice patterns at that time either. So I gave it up again. And then I got pregnant with my youngest child 2 years later, and I thought, now is the time. Because at that time my grandmother had been knitting for me. I just sent her the pattern and the yarn, and then she knitted it for me, but she was getting very old, and the thing she sent back to me was like beginning to be full of mistakes, and she couldn't concentrate. She was too old. And then I said, now is the time. And at that time there was like beginning to come a lot of new designers from Norway and Danish knitting designers, and I started knitting again for her when she was in my tummy. And as I was knitting, there were some parts I didn't understand. So I just made it up myself. And I thought I could do this different, it's more easy. And I put on little details. For example, I was knitting a pair of little shorts for her. And I put ruffles on the back because I saw in an old knitting magazine from when my grandmother was like a child that the babies were wearing little shorts with ruffles on the bottom.
On the bottom.
So I made that, and I never saw it before. And I showed it on Instagram, and I got a lot of messages. Please make a pattern. How did you do it? And I also made like a little play suit for her, like a little tiny play suit. And I also got a lot of positive feedback on that. And
was that also the reason you started to design your own projects, because you
yeah
became so much comments?
yeah, I got so many comments, and I had a hard time following a pattern. When I bought one, I always saw, no, I can do this different. This is not an easy way to do it. Many times I couldn't understand what they were writing. So I was just, I'll just do it this way instead.
Yeah.
And then I started designing my own patterns. And in the beginning, I was just designing like for babies. And then she was growing up. And as you know, many kids, they don't want to wear what their moms made them. Thank God I have one. My youngest daughter, she wants to wear it. My oldest, she would rather die than wear what I made her. Yeah. Hopefully when she gets older, she will learn to appreciate it again. But then I thought, maybe I should start knitting something for myself. And I still had this issue with all the stitches on the needles, and I thought, oh my God, I will never, ever, ever finish this project. But then I got started, and I learned how to enjoy the process instead of just wanting to finish it in a certain amount of time. I learned to enjoy just knitting and seeing the thing grow instead of just being focused on getting a finished project quickly. And then I got hooked on making patterns for adults too. And that's what I do mostly now, because I don't have any babies, so it's not interesting for me for making for babies anymore. So I make patterns for myself mostly now.
And do you still get some inspiration from your grandmother's magazines, or do you also get?
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah. I love to. I get inspiration from everywhere, all knitting patterns and what I see in the current fashion scene. This sweater that I'm wearing now is actually inspired by a sweater made by a Danish designer called Stine Goya.
Okay.
With this honeycomb pattern, and I thought it was so beautiful I had to make one myself. So I get inspired from both like old-fashioned knitting wear and also what happens now. Everywhere I get inspiration. I mostly knit what I myself would like to wear. I mostly knit things with details. I'm not so much a basic knitting person. I don't make so many basic knitting patterns. I'm more into making something with detail for this one.
So if you have to describe your style, you would say you're all into details, just small touch.
Yeah, exactly.
I also saw your feet with a little bit of pink or terracotta.
Yeah. I love color.
Yeah. But it's very interesting to see, because most people, when they think of a Nordic design, it's always this nature colors. It's so nice to see some popping colors, but also warm. So interesting. How do you see that? Is it something you also acknowledge, that everything?
Yeah. True. I think it's changing. I think there's a lot of new designers here in Denmark who are starting to embrace color more. Than used to do. So I think it's changing actually, but you're absolutely right. Nordic design is like also Nordic furniture design is more simple and that's a Nordic style, more simple and toned down colors. And but I don't like that. I like color. You should see my home.
Well, I guess that will be very interesting to see.
Yeah.
Get a lot of inspiration there as well, from your home, from your furniture, from the colors. It's nice to see.
Yeah.
And if you knit your designs, is it mostly knitted top down, or do you also use other techniques?
I think if you buy a knitting pattern made here in Norway or Denmark or the Scandinavian countries, it's mostly knitted top down. There's a lot of advantages knitting top down, but for me, knitting bottom up, it gives me some design-wise opportunities that I don't have the other round. For example, this sweater is knitted bottom up.
Okay.
Because it's easier design-wise and writing down the pattern, it's easier to describe the decreases instead of the increases when you have to fit this pattern. Mm-hmm. Easier for me.
So because you have more details, it's actually easier to knit bottom up than top down.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. That's just how I feel. Maybe another designer will answer differently. I don't know. But it's for me. Maybe it's because I've always knitted top down. I feel like I need to explore the other opportunity much more now. So that's how I knit. I've been knitting lately. It's bottom up.
Is the sweater you are wearing your latest design, or are you still working on another design as well?
No, I want to show you my latest design. Okay. It's very funny because it's one of the first designs I made for an adult. A popcorn sweater. I just made it in a kid's version actually.
Oh, so
and
cute.
It's made in your yarn, the Malou light and Mira cotton yarn.
Yeah.
And it's because it's been many years since I made it for adults, and I got so many requests. Please make it for kids too. Please make it for kids too. And it took me a lot of years to get started, but I actually finally finished. So now it's available if you can see, in the smaller sizes. And actually, my 9-year-old daughter, who absolutely hates wearing what I make for her, she wants to wear this. So that's a big success. Yeah, very, very, very big success.
Maybe that's the start again, that she likes knitted clothes.
Yeah, maybe. I hope so.
And if you have to, for instance, advise me as a beginner knitter, what do you advise me to start with when I want to knit a sweater? What should I look for in a pattern?
I think if you want to knit a sweater, I always advise people, to get started on the basic, try to knit something, getting comfortable with the different techniques, and get to know YouTube. There's a lot of interesting videos on YouTube. And if you want to start knitting a sweater, I say do the Rowland sweaters, the basic with the increases here, and knit it top down, because that's the easiest part. And always advise people to be patient, because it's not something you learn overnight. And I think that's the problem most people have when they start to knit. They want to knit complicated things overnight. And they see something very nice and they want to knit it right away, but they have to start with basic things and be very patient, and don't give up. Try again. That's what I did. And yeah, you will need to do a lot on unraveling in your lifetime.
Yeah, that's true. And if you have to recommend a garn that is to use to make a sweater for the first time, which type of yarn would you think of?
I think just a normal wool yarn, like merino yarn, because you can unravel it again and again. It doesn't. If you knit with mohair, for example, it's very hard to unravel, and if you unravel it too many times, you can damage the fiber. So just a basic merino wool yarn I would recommend, because it's very easy to knit with, and if you make a mistake, you can just unravel, and the yarn is okay after, and you can knit again, and you can unravel again. And also mohair is very expensive, and if you knit for the first time, it's better to use a more non-expensive yarn, I think.
And what is your favorite type of yarn to knit with?
It's very hard to say. I thought a lot about that question, and I think mostly, wool, just normal wool, merino wool, combined with some mohair. I've been knitting. The latest trend here in Denmark and the Nordic countries is a lot of mohair. It's I like that too, but sometimes I think about the finished product that people has to be able to buy the yarn, because mohair is very expensive. So sometimes I think that when I make a knitting pattern, I think about that too, that the finished product has to be available to the common knitter. I think mohair is very expensive, so I try sometimes to think about the cost of the yarn too. But so just basic wool. I like normal merino wool. Is actually one of my favorites. This is knitted in merino wool, and I love it. I love the structure. It's you can see the stitches, and it has like a nice feel. That's what I love.
And are there still things you want to learn in the future? New techniques, or what, or
of course,
perhaps something else?
Many things. I love to, I would love to explore more fair isle knitting, like with different colors. This was the first sweater that I knitted with 2 colors, and it's actually very simple, but it took me a lot of work because I never tried it before. So I think on my to-do list is like a traditional fair isle sweater with lots of colors and patterns and color changing all the time, because it's very complicated, and it's a lot of work, and it's a different technique that I never tried before. So I think it's on my very, very, very long to knit and to learn list.
Are there new things coming?
Well, I'm working. I'm actually. I'm going to work on a new cool design with using your yarn, and I'm waiting for it on the mail right now. So it's going to be more basic, actually. It's going to be. I'm not going to say too much because I want to keep it a secret yet. But it's more basic that I usually do. A sweater with a very good fit to your body. I'm gonna focus a lot on the fit, so it makes you look good. And just more basic than I usually do. So I can't wait to show it, but I'm waiting for the yarn. So please, Mr. Postman. I'm always very excited when I'm starting a new design, because I love the process. I don't enjoy the writing down the knitting pattern and all the reading the pattern afterwards and making all the technical things. I love the design, and I would love if I could afford someone to make all the all the hard work, so I can just knit and design.
Well, Camilla, I want to thank you for our interview, and
you're welcome.
It was very nice to meet you and to get to know you more. And perhaps you can tell once more where people can find you, the name of your
they can
website.
Find me. My website is on the internet is nordicknittingtale.com.
Yes.
And that's where you can find all my knitting patterns. And as I said before, I have them in English, Norwegian, and Danish, and a few in German and French and Spanish. I forgot Spanish for.
Spanish as well.
And then I have an Instagram account also called A Nordic Knitting Tale, where I show my work, sewing and knitting. And actually, I forgot to mention that I also have an account where you can I show pictures from my home, A Nordic Tale. There I show only pictures from my very colorful house.